Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
The polished marble floors of the Port Charles Courthouse, usually a stage for the dry, procedural machinations of the legal system, seem to absorb the very sound and light from the air, leaving a suffocating stillness in their wake. The air was thick, not with humidity, but with a palpable, razor-sharp tension that seemed to coat the back of every throat. On this day, the building was not merely a hall of justice, it was a theater, and the audience, a packed gallery of the city's most prominent and damaged souls, collectively held its breath. At the center of it all, seated in the witness stand with a posture that suggested both profound fragility and unbreakable resolve, was Jacqueline Grace, known to all as Jacinda. She was a vision of contained trauma. Dressed in a simple, elegant navy blue dress, a color of somber seriousness, she looked both older and younger than her years. Her hands, clasped tightly together on the wooden ledge before her, were the only betrayal of the storm raging within, the knuckles white with the force of her grip. Across the room, at the defense table, sat the man who had once been the center of her universe, the man whose smile had once been the sun around which her life orbited, Michael Corinthos. To the outside world, he was a pillar of the community, a successful businessman, the scion of the most powerful, albeit controversial, family in Port Charles. But in Jacinda's eyes, and in the narrative the prosecution was meticulously building, he was something else entirely. The district attorney, a shrewd and relentless woman named Amanda Jones, approached the stand with the careful, measured pace of a lioness circling her prey. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft, almost gentle, a stark contrast to the brutal questions it framed. "Ms. Grace," Jones began, her tone deceptively calm, "can you please tell the court, in your own words, about the nature of your relationship with the defendant, Michael Corinthos?" Jacinda's eyes, large and luminous with unshed tears, flickered towards Michael for a fraction of a second before returning to the DA. The brief contact was like a spark in a room full of gas fumes. Michael's expression was a carefully constructed mask of stoic dignity, but those who knew him, his mother, Carly, seated rigidly in the front row, his father, Sonny, a brooding presence beside her, could see the faint tremor in his jaw. "Our relationship," Jacinda started, her voice a fragile thread of sound that nonetheless carried to the farthest corners of the room, began as a fairy tale. He was charming, attentive, powerful. He made me feel seen, and for a woman who had spent her life feeling invisible in the shadow of the General Hospital legacy, that was a potent drug. She was referring, of course, to her late father, a renowned surgeon whose reputation was both her inheritance and her burden. We were engaged. We were planning a life, a family. I believed him to be my future. And when did that perception begin to change? Jones prompted, her hands clasped behind her back. It was a slow, insidious process, Jacinda admitted, her gaze turning inward, staring at a point on the wall as if watching the memories play out like a private film. The compliments became critiques. The protectiveness became possessiveness. He started isolating me from my friends, my colleagues. He'd get angry if I was late from a shift at the hospital, accusing me of things I would never do. He said it was because he loved me so much, that he was just worried about losing me. And I wanted to believe that. I clung to that explanation because the alternative was too terrifying. The gallery was silent, save for the frantic scratching of reporters' pens and the low, steady hum of the air conditioning. Carly Corinthos shifted uncomfortably, her protective instincts towards her son warring with a dawning, horrifying comprehension. "Can you describe for the court a specific instance of this controlling behavior escalating into something more?" Jones asked, her voice still soft but now laced with a sharp, prosecutorial edge. Jacinda took a shaky breath, her fingers tightening further. "It was about 6 months before the end. I had been asked to consult on a complex pediatric case with Dr. Finn. We spent several late nights in the hospital library, just researching, trying to save this child's life. When I finally got home, exhausted, Michael was waiting for me. The apartment was dark. He didn't yell. His voice was quiet, cold. He accused me of having an affair. I tried to explain, to show him the research, but he backhanded me across the face." A collective, sharp intake of breath rippled through the gallery. Sonny Corinthos's head snapped towards his son, his dark eyes flashing with a storm of conflicting emotions, disbelief, anger, and a paternal defensiveness. Michael, for his part, remained immobile, but a faint sheen of sweat now glistened on his temple. He was immediately remorseful, Jacinda continued, a bitter, broken sound that was almost a laugh escaping her lips. He cried. He begged for forgiveness. He said it was the stress of his work, that he was terrified of losing me, that he'd never do it again. And I, like a fool, I believed him. I thought it was a one-time mistake. I thought my love could fix him. This pattern, Jacinda explained over the next hour, became the new normal. The verbal assaults became more frequent, the accusations more outlandish. The physical violence, while never a daily occurrence, was a constant, looming threat, a shove into a wall, a brutal grip on her arm that left bruises she expertly concealed with makeup and long sleeves, another slap when she dared to question his decisions about their shared finances. She described living in a state of perpetual hypervigilance, calibrating her every word, her every action, to avoid triggering his rage. She was a ghost in her own life, walking on eggshells in her own home. And yet, you stayed, Jones stated, voicing the question on everyone's mind. I stayed because I was afraid, Jacinda whispered, a single tear finally tracing a path down her cheek. Afraid of what he would do if I left. Afraid that no one would believe me. He's Michael Corinthos. His family, they own this town. I was a nobody. I was also financially dependent on him. He had systematically separated me from my support system and my career. Leaving felt impossible. It felt like a death sentence. The testimony was devastating. The portrait she painted was not of a monster in the dark, but of a sophisticated, beloved man who wielded his power and charm as both a weapon and a shield, a man who could break your spirit with a word and your body with his hands, all while professing his undying love. The public image of Michael Corinthos, the philanthropist, the doting son, was cracking under the weight of Jacinda's quiet, credible words. Then D.A. Jones approached a new line of questioning. Her demeanor shifted, becoming even more grave, if that was possible. Ms. Grace, I now need to take you back to the night of September 14th. The night your engagement to the defendant ended. Can you tell the court what happened that night? This was the heart of the matter. The assault charges were one thing, but the events of that night were the foundation of the most serious allegations. Jacinda visibly trembled, her composure finally beginning to fracture. She reached for a glass of water with a shaking hand, taking a small sip before nodding. We had a fight, she began, her voice thick with emotion. A terrible fight. He had found a text message on my phone from an old college friend, a male friend who was going through a divorce and had reached out for support. Michael was enraged. He called me every vile name you can imagine. He said I was a whore, that I had been cheating on him all along. He threw my phone against the wall, shattering it. I was backed into a corner of our living room, literally and figuratively. I had never seen him like that. His eyes, they were empty. Soulless. She paused, gathering the tattered remnants of her strength. I knew, in that moment, that he was going to kill me. I could see it. I tried to run, to get to the door, but he grabbed me by the hair and yanked me back. He threw me to the floor. And then, he started kicking me. Again and again. I curled into a ball, trying to protect myself, but the blows just kept coming. I remember the taste of blood in my mouth. I remember the sound of my own ribs cracking. I remember thinking, this is how I die. The courtroom was a tomb. Carly Corinthos had her hand clamped over her mouth, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Sonny's face was a mask of granite, but his eyes were fixed on his son with a look of dawning, horrific realization. And then, something changed, Jacinda said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, forcing everyone to lean forward to hear. He stopped. He just stopped. He looked down at me, at what he had done, and a strange, cold calm settled over him. He didn't apologize. He didn't help me up. He just said, clean yourself up. We have the charity gala tomorrow. And then he walked out. The sheer, chilling banality of that statement, the concern for a social event in the immediate aftermath of a near-fatal beating, sent a new wave of revulsion through the room. "What did you do, Miss Grace?" Jones asked softly. "I lay there for I don't know how long," she said. "When I was sure he was gone, I managed to drag myself to my phone, but it was destroyed. I crawled to the landline in the kitchen and I called the only person I thought I could trust, the one person I knew wasn't afraid of the Corinthos name, my cousin, Laura. Laura Collins." The mention of the former mayor and one of Port Charles's most respected figures added a new layer of credibility to the testimony. Laura Collins had indeed been the one to find Jacinda, to rush her to General Hospital, to insist the police be called, setting in motion the legal proceedings that had led to this very moment. The medical records, already entered into evidence, corroborated every gruesome detail: multiple fractured ribs, a ruptured spleen, a concussion, and bruising so extensive the attending physician had documented it as consistent with a severe, sustained assault. Jones let the silence hang in the air for a long moment, allowing the horror of Jacinda's account to settle deeply into the consciousness of every person in the room. Then, she took a final, deliberate step closer to the stand. "Ms. Grace, the defense has argued that your relationship was volatile, that arguments were mutual, and that you have a history of instability, exacerbated by the pressure of your family name. They suggest you are fabricating this narrative out of spite, for financial gain, or due to a fragile mental state. How do you respond to that?" Jacinda lifted her head, and for the first time, a flash of pure, undiluted fire shone in her eyes. The fragility was still there, but it was now armored in a steely resolve. "I am not fragile. I am a survivor," she stated, her voice gaining a new, powerful clarity. "What he did to me was not a volatile argument. It was torture. It was attempted murder. And as for my mental state..." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the gallery, past the shocked faces of Port Charles's elite, past the stony visage of Judge Walters, before finally landing, with the force of a physical blow, directly on Michael. "The defense, and the world, believes the worst thing that ever happened to me was the beating on September 14th. They believe the deepest secret I hold is the shame and the fear I carried for so long." She took a deep, shuddering breath, as if steeling herself for a leap into an abyss. "But they are wrong. The beating was a horror, but it was not my deepest shame. My deepest shame is a secret I have carried alone for months. A secret I was too terrified, too broken, to ever reveal. Until today." The air in the room seemed to vanish. You could have heard a pin drop in the vast, echoing space. Michael's mask of stoicism finally slipped, his eyes widening a fraction in confusion and a flicker of alarm. His lawyer half rose from his seat, objecting, but Jacinda's voice, now ringing with a raw, desperate power, cut through the procedural noise. "The night he beat me, the night Laura took me to General Hospital," Jacinda said, her words measured, deliberate, each one a hammer blow, "the doctors did more than just treat my injuries. They ran a standard battery of tests. And they discovered something. Something that changed everything." She turned her body fully to face the judge, but her words were for the entire world. "Your Honor," she said, her voice trembling not with weakness, but with the sheer magnitude of what she was about to unveil, "on the night Michael Corinthos nearly killed me, I was 8 weeks pregnant." A collective, gasped "oh" echoed through the gallery, followed by an immediate, frantic buzz of whispers that the bailiff had to gavel into silence. Carly let out a strangled cry, her face draining of all color. Sonny looked as if he'd been physically struck. The trauma of the assault. Jacinda continued, tears now streaming freely down her face, no longer able to be contained, the internal bleeding, the shock to my system, it was too much. I lost the baby. I miscarried in the emergency room, just hours after he left me lying on the floor to die. The revelation was nuclear. It transformed the narrative entirely. This was no longer just a story of domestic violence, it was a story of a life and future brutally and irrevocably destroyed. The assault had not just been on Jacinda, it had been on their unborn child. But Jacinda was not finished. She had one final, shocking truth to reveal, a truth that would send the proceedings spiraling into chaos. And that, Your Honor, is the secret I have carried. But it is not the only one. You see, when the police initially investigated, they took my statement. They saw my injuries. But Michael, with his resources, his lawyers, his influence, he was able to post bail immediately. He walked out of that police station a free man, while I was in a hospital bed, grieving the child he had murdered. Her voice rose, filled with a righteous, furious agony. What the police didn't know, what no one knew until this very second, is that when I was discharged from General Hospital, I was not in my right mind. The grief, the pain, the betrayal, it consumed me. And in my desperation, in my shattered state, I did something. I took the shirt Michael was wearing that night, the shirt stained with my blood, and I hid it. I couldn't bear to look at it, but I couldn't bring myself to destroy it. It was evidence. Evidence of what he had done to me, to our baby. She looked directly at D.A. Jones, who was watching her with an expression of stunned, albeit prepared, intensity. I gave that shirt to my cousin, Laura. I asked her to keep it safe, to hide it somewhere no one would ever find it, until the day I was strong enough to face this. Until the day I was in this courtroom, under oath, and could ensure it would be used to deliver true justice. Jacinda's gaze then swung back to Michael, whose face was now a ghastly shade of pale. The confidence, the arrogance, had completely evaporated, replaced by naked, primal fear. The blood on that shirt isn't just mine, Michael, Jacinda said, her voice dropping to a deadly, quiet whisper that was somehow more terrifying than any scream. The forensics team, working with the evidence D.A. Jones submitted this morning after I finally gave her the shirt, can now confirm it. The spatter patterns, the DNA, it's consistent with my account of the assault. But more than that, with today's advanced technology, they were able to isolate another DNA profile. A fetal DNA profile. The DNA of our son. She let that hang in the air for a beat, the final, devastating piece of the puzzle slamming into place. That shirt doesn't just prove you beat me. It proves you killed your own child. It's not just assault. It's manslaughter. At the very least. The courtroom exploded. Reporters scrambled for the doors, desperate to file the story. The gallery erupted in a cacophony of shouts, cries, and exclamations. Carly Corinthos collapsed against her husband, her body racked with sobs. Sonny held her, but his eyes were locked on his son, a maelstrom of horror, disappointment, and a crumbling paternal loyalty in their depths. Order! Order in the court! Judge Walters boomed, slamming his gavel repeatedly, his face a mask of stern shock. Through the chaos, Michael Corinthos sat frozen. His lawyer was frantically whispering in his ear, but Michael seemed to not hear him. He was staring at Jacinda, his world, his carefully constructed life, imploding around him in real time. The facade of the powerful, untouchable air was gone, revealing a hollow, terrified man staring into the abyss of his own actions. It was at that precise moment that the main doors of the courtroom swung open. Two uniformed police officers, their faces set in grim, professional lines, marched in, followed by a stern-looking police captain. They bypassed the chaotic gallery entirely and walked purposefully towards the defense table. The entire room seemed to freeze, the noise dying down to a stunned hush as all eyes followed their progress. The lead officer approached the bench. "Your Honor," the captain said, his voice cutting cleanly through the silence, "apologies for the interruption. Based on the new evidence just presented under oath by Ms. Grace, evidence which has now been formally verified and entered into the record by the District Attorney's Office, we have probable cause to arrest Michael Corinthos for the additional, and far more serious, charge of involuntary manslaughter." He then turned to the defense table. Michael's lawyer shot to his feet, objecting vehemently, but it was futile. The legal machinery was now in motion, and it was merciless. "Michael Corinthos," the captain declared, his voice echoing in the dead silence, "you are under arrest for the death of JG, an unborn fetus, as per the new evidence presented. You have the right to remain silent." The words were drowned out by the fresh wave of uproar. As the officers moved to handcuff him, the scene became one of surreal pandemonium. Michael was pulled to his feet, his hands being secured behind his back. The metallic click of the handcuffs was a small, sharp sound that seemed to finalize everything. The sound of a life of privilege and power crashing down. He didn't struggle. He didn't protest. He simply looked across the room one last time at Jacinda, who had sunk back into the witness chair, her body trembling with the aftershocks of her confession, but her head held high. In her eyes, there was no triumph, only a vast, desolate peace. The truth, the whole, horrific truth, was finally out. The secret was no longer hers to carry alone. As Michael was led away, past his weeping mother and his stoic, shattered father, past the flashing cameras and the stunned faces of his peers, the world of Port Charles shifted on its axis. The spoilers for General Hospital, as they would be reported in breathless headlines for days to come, were no longer just plot points in a soap opera. They were the stark, brutal facts of a tragedy that had been hiding in plain sight, a shocking news story ripped from the darkest corners of human relationship, finally revealed in a courtroom where justice, long delayed, had arrived with a thunderous, unforgiving finality. The reign of Michael Corinthos was over. The long, hard road of Jacinda's healing, at last, could truly begin. The courtroom was packed, tension thick in the air as the judge called for silence. Every seat was filled, every breath drawn in anticipation. People had been whispering for days that something huge was coming, but no one could have predicted that Jacinda would be the one to turn the entire case upside down. She stood in the witness box, her hands trembling slightly as she glanced toward Michael, who sat at the defense table looking confident, too confident. He thought he had it all figured out, that Jacinda would protect him like she always had. But this time, things were different. Jacinda had carried the weight of too many secrets, and today, she was ready to let it all out. The judge asked her to proceed, and the courtroom fell silent, every eye fixed on her. Jacinda took a deep breath, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. "Your Honor," she began, "there's something I need to tell the court, something that changes everything." Michael shifted uneasily, trying to catch her eye, but she didn't look at him. His attorney leaned in, whispering urgently, "Don't react. Stay calm." But Michael couldn't help it, his jaw tightened, his legs started bouncing under the table. Jacinda continued, her voice growing stronger. "For weeks, I've been hiding what really happened that night. I told myself it was for the best, that I was protecting someone I cared about. But the truth is, I was protecting a criminal." Gasps rippled through the room, and the judge banged the gavel. "Order!" But there was no stopping Jacinda now. She looked directly at Michael. "It was you. You're the one who set everything in motion. You're the one who made sure the evidence disappeared." Michael's face drained of color. "Jacinda, don't do this," he hissed under his breath, but she ignored him. The prosecutor stood, seizing the moment. "Ms. Jacobs," she said firmly, "are you saying under oath that the defendant, Michael Corinthos, tampered with the evidence?" Jacinda nodded, tears filling her eyes. "Yes. He told me to lie. He made me falsify the report to cover up what he'd done." The courtroom erupted again, reporters typing furiously as camera flashes went off like fireworks. Carly, sitting behind Michael, covered her mouth in shock. She looked between her son and Jacinda, her heart racing. "Michael, what did you do?" she whispered, but Michael didn't answer. He stared straight ahead, his world collapsing piece by piece. The judge called for order again, glaring at the chaos unfolding. "If there's one more outburst, I'll clear this courtroom," he warned. Jacinda wiped her tears and kept going. "I didn't want to believe it. I loved him. I thought I was helping him, but when I found out the truth, when I saw the proof, I knew I couldn't keep quiet anymore." The prosecutor approached with a document in hand. "Ms. Jacobs, is this the evidence you're referring to?" Jacinda nodded. "Yes. Those are the files Michael had me alter. And this," she reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive, her hand shaking, "this contains the original copies. The real ones." The courtroom collectively gasped again. The judge leaned forward. "Bailiff, take that into evidence immediately." Michael's lawyer jumped up, furious. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. My client had no knowledge of any altered files. This is a desperate attempt by a disgruntled ex to ruin his reputation." But Jacinda wasn't done. "Disgruntled ex?" she said sharply. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to destroy someone I once loved? No. I'm doing this because I can't live with the guilt anymore. Michael finally snapped. You're lying, he shouted, standing up. The judge slammed his gavel down. Mr. Corinthos, sit down. But Michael was shaking, anger flashing in his eyes. She's trying to save herself. She's the one who stole that evidence, not me. Jacinda turned toward him, tears streaming down her cheeks. You told me to, Michael. You said if I didn't, everything we worked for would be gone. You said no one would ever find out. But you were wrong. The silence that followed was suffocating. The prosecutor folded her arms, watching Michael unravel. Your Honor, she said calmly, the state moves for immediate remand based on new evidence and witness testimony indicating obstruction of justice. Michael's lawyer shouted in protest, but it was no use. The judge sighed, shaking his head. Given the seriousness of the allegations and the new evidence, I have no choice but to revoke bail. He turned to the bailiff. Take him into custody. The room exploded again as Michael's mother cried out, No! Please, he didn't do this. The bailiff moved in, pulling Michael's hands behind his back. Michael struggled, looking at Jacinda with disbelief. You ruined me, he said quietly, his voice breaking. After everything I did for you. Jacinda's voice was trembling but firm. You did this to yourself, Michael. I just told the truth. The bailiff led him away, and Michael's lawyer followed, shouting about appeals and mistrials. The cameras caught every second as Michael was escorted out in handcuffs, the image instantly going viral. After the chaos settled, Jacinda remained on the stand, visibly shaken. The judge leaned forward. Miss Jacobs, I hope you understand the magnitude of what you've done today. Jacinda nodded. I do, Your Honor. I've been living with this lie for months. I couldn't carry it anymore. The judge sighed. Very well. You may step down. Jacinda walked off the stand, barely able to breathe as she made her way to the exit. Reporters swarmed her immediately. Jacinda, why did you come forward now? One asked. Did someone pressure you? Another shouted. Jacinda stopped, looking straight into the cameras. No one pressured me, she said. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Outside the courthouse, the scene was chaotic. News vans, photographers, and bystanders crowded the steps. Carly emerged a few minutes later, her face pale. She ignored the reporters and went straight to her car, slamming the door shut. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, and tears spilled down her cheeks. My son, she whispered. How could this happen? At the same time, in another part of town, Sonny got the call. His expression hardened as he listened to the news on the other end. They arrested Michael, he repeated, disbelief giving way to fury. Who's behind this? When he heard Jacinda's name, his tone darkened. I want to know everything about her. Now. Back in the jail, Michael sat alone in the holding cell, his mind spinning. He replayed Jacinda's words over and over, trying to figure out where everything went wrong. He'd trusted her. He'd thought she was on his side. His lawyer came to see him, trying to reassure him. We'll fight this, the attorney said. We'll discredit her testimony. There's no solid proof yet. But Michael wasn't listening. He stared blankly ahead. She had the flash drive, he muttered. The original files. How did she even get them? The lawyer frowned. We'll find out. But for now, keep quiet. Don't say anything to anyone. Meanwhile, Jacinda returned home, feeling both relieved and terrified. She poured herself a glass of water, her hands still trembling. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A cold voice spoke on the other end. You shouldn't have done that. Jacinda froze. Who is this? The voice laughed softly. You think you can just expose him and walk away? You have no idea what you've started. The line went dead. Jacinda dropped the phone, her heart racing. She knew exactly what that meant. Michael wasn't the only one involved. There were others, people who had just lost everything because of her testimony. Back at the police station, Dante arrived to see Michael behind bars. "You want to tell me what's going on?" he asked. Michael looked up at his brother, his voice bitter. "She turned on me. She gave them everything." Dante sighed, rubbing his temples. "Michael, if you really did what she said, you need to come clean. This is serious." Michael glared at him. "I didn't do it. She's lying to save herself." Dante studied him for a moment, unsure whether to believe him. "Then you better prove it," he said quietly. As the night fell over Port Charles, word of Michael's arrest spread quickly. Everyone was talking, at Kelly's, the Metro Court, even at General Hospital. People speculated about what Jacinda's revelation meant for the Corinthos family. Some said Michael would never recover from this, others believed he'd fight his way out like a true Corinthos. But deep down, those who knew the family best understood this wasn't just about one bad decision. It was about trust, loyalty, and betrayal at the highest level. Jacinda sat alone by her window, staring out at the city lights, wondering if she'd done the right thing. She knew she'd just set off a chain reaction that couldn't be stopped. Somewhere out there, powerful people were already planning their next move. And though she'd exposed the truth, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Because in Port Charles, every truth comes with a price, and Jacinda was about to find out just how high that price really was. Meanwhile, in his cell, Michael clenched his fists and whispered to himself, "This isn't the end. She thinks she can destroy me? She has no idea who she's dealing with." His eyes darkened, a storm brewing behind them. One thing was certain, the war between Michael and Jacinda had only just begun. And as dawn broke over Port Charles, the fallout from Jacinda's shocking courtroom confession would ripple through every family, every friendship, and every secret still buried in the shadows.